Hey everyone! In today's video we're going to start installing the hat channel on the ceiling. Stay tuned. Alright, since I've got the first layer of Roxel in, what I'm going to do next is install the hat channel. And in order to do that, what I'd like to do is install the hat channel parallel to the joist instead of perpendicular to the joist, so that they're recessed in the joist cavities and I gain about 5/8 of an inch of height. Now that may not seem like a lot, but the problem with if I don't do that, I've got to worry about this bath fan coming down another 5/8 of an inch also. And to take into account the spacing between all the hat channel, they can't be any more than 24 inches apart. So I have to think about that and where those are going to all fit in the ceiling here. And then I've also got to think about that last cavity right over there. There was a nailer up there before. I took that down so I can go ahead and install a hat channel in there. Okay, so here's a diagram from soundproofingcompany.com that discusses the raised blocking situation. And you can see some of the distances they mentioned there in terms of how the hat channel should be installed. On the right hand corner, you'll see that there is a diagram that shows where the blocking should be installed in the joist cavities. Now anytime I'm doing this kind of work, I always like to run calculations of my own just to make sure. I don't want to get too far into a project and realize that things are not as I thought they would be. So in order to have a 1/2 inch gap between the drywall and the underside of the joist, they mentioned installing the blocking at 2 3/8 of an inch from the underside of the joist, and that would be 2x4 blocking. I'm going to throw the calculations in the description below, but I believe the blocking should be installed at 2 1/8 of an inch if you want to have a 1/2 inch gap between the underside of the joist and the drywall. Alright, so in order to install the hat channel parallel to the joist in this particular area here, so the clips would look like this up here. And as you can see, this clip's going to hit right there. And I've got no space at all. So I kind of thought this through, and what I decided to do is install a block going from the top of this wall here over to this joist, and then I can put the clip on that. What that means also is I'm going to have to notch out this joist so that the clip sits flush and it's up at the right height. And so I'm going to do that in 5 different spots on this wall. And what that's going to entail is making sure I get precise measurements so I get the right height there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and stop right here and just kind of take a quick pause because this really did not work very well in this first joist cavity. Now, some of the information that I'm going to provide here I'm going to leave in this video because it's relevant to the other side of the bathroom. The space between the wall and the joist became more narrow as I got closer to the front of the bathroom, so this really did not turn out well. Alright, so one final point before I get to work here. I don't want to overtalk this too much, but you're probably wondering why I just don't go ahead and install hat channel here and skip this section over here. The problem is that if I put hat channel in this area here and skip this area over here, what will happen is the hat channel will be about 7 inches at the center point from this outside wall, which in my opinion is a little too far for that first row of drywall screws. So that's why I am making such a big deal out of putting some hat channel in this area here. Alright, so you may not care about this part too much, but I just kind of want to explain real quick what I'm doing here. So I've got my first block location marked out right there. It's 3 inches from that outside wall. And so what I'm going to do is cut a block to fit on top of here to go to this joist over here. And that block can't be any more than 4 1/2 inches long. And the other thing I need to think about is that mark right there is because I've taken a straight edge and set it across all these joists here, and that's where the top of the straight edge landed. So I want the bottom of my block to be 5/8 of an inch recessed into the cavity, which means I'm going to have to cut a dado in that block that I put in this area here. And then of course I got to notch this out too. So this is pretty tricky. So here's a sample block that I'm going to be installing. You can see it's got a dado cut in the end there. That's the side that's going to rest up against the joist. This side is on top of the wall there. Then I put an extra piece of plywood there so I have a little more meat to grab onto. And I've got a bracket on top here. This bracket is screwed into the top of this block, and then it's also going to screw into the joist. So that's what that looks like there. And each one of the locations up there, I had to cut the dado a different depth because of how they fit up on top of that wall in each one of those locations. So you got to keep that in mind too. Your dado cut, if you run into this kind of situation, you have to make sure you check the measurements at each one of the spots. I found that mine were totally different in all 4 different spots that I put the blocks. Okay, so I've got all 4 blocks in there. You can see they're all in those 4 different locations. And what I did too is I took a string and pulled it across from the first block to the last block, just to make sure all the blocks are at the same height. And what I found was one of them actually was a little bit too low, so I had to cut the dado again in that one block. That's the one right over there. There's a string there touching all 4 blocks. So one piece of great news is that I was actually able to route the cable that ran across the ceiling here and then down to the wall sconce to this box down here. I just had probably an extra maybe 3 inches of cable. That worked out pretty well. I was really happy with that. And what I discovered later on, after I really looked at this before I was going to put the hat channel in, is that that box right there is too small to house all that cable. So what I made a decision to do then was to replace this box here with a 4-gang box instead of a 3-gang box. And then that last position right there, the last spot there, will be covered with a blank. So that worked out pretty well. I just have to put some staples in. I also had to route some wire through the wall there, and that comes up to this box. That's going to be stapled over here also. Alright, so I've got 2 blocks up there. You can see those 2 there. And what I'm going to do is run the hat channel from here to here, skip the cables, put another block over here, and then run the hat channel all the way to the back wall. I need to make sure I stay no more than 48 inches apart with my brackets. And so the other thing I did too, to make sure that the blocking was at the proper depth in that cavity, I took a couple pieces of plywood. The one on top here is 5/8 of an inch. So I screwed this to the bottom of the joist. Then this acted as a spacer, and I rested the blocking on top of that and actually clamped it down using some Irwin clamps. Alright, so this second row is all done. I've got 5 blocks in there. It turned out very nice. Alright, for the second cavity over here, it was pretty simple to put the blocks in because the joists are at the same depth here. But once I got to this set of joists here, you can see that there's the original right there, and that's the sister there. I wanted to make sure that I used the sister, since it's at the lowest point, as my point of reference for the support block. And I also decided to use a 2x4 instead of using plywood as my support block, so I could eliminate the flex in that support block. Alright, so this row is all done now, and as you can see there, I put 2 blocks at the front. Then we're going to skip the cable here. This is where another section of hat channel is going to start, and it's going to run to the opposite wall. We're going to skip this row here where the bath fan sits. I just don't want to deal with trying to put hat channel in that area there. So we're going to go ahead and work on that last row over there. Now I'm trying to figure out if I want to tie into the wall or tie into the joist over there. So I'm talking about the joist on the opposite side of this wall here. I'm thinking I'm probably going to do similar to what I did over here on this side, where I put blocks up like that. Alright, so there's one of the blocks for this side of the bathroom, and that was not fun to put up there because you can see there's a pipe right up on top there. So I had to put the screws in at an angle. So kind of like this here. Here's another block I'm getting ready to put in right now. You can see that there. Got the bracket on this side here up against the joist over here. And then 2 screws, those are 3-inch screws on the left hand side that are going to sink into the top of the wall. So that's ready to go. And I've got my little combination square up there on top. I'll kind of zoom you in a little bit here. Might be able to see that there. I'm just checking for level as I put these up. I noticed that if I did not check for level, that they tended to be a little bit tilted. So I'm glad I actually remembered to do that. Alright, so as you can see, there are very few opportunities to get blocking on top of this wall here. And one of the spots that I took advantage of was right there. The only problem is you can see there's a hole there that's now filled, and then there's a block there. Now on the opposite side of this joist here is a joist hanger, of course, for this block here, and so that's interfering with the bracket that I'm putting up there. So I had to cut that, and then I also had to make this a lot more narrow than a 2x4. I think it's about 2 3/4 of an inch wide there. So there's a block itself. You can see that there. So that's going up next. Alright, so I've got all the blocks up now. It took quite a while to do that, but they're all up there. I've got 6 on this side. And you can see I've pulled a string from one end to the other just to check to make sure they're all at the same depth. And every single one of the blocks in the middle misses the string by about a 1/16 of an inch. So that told me that one of the blocks on the end is off, and I found that it's actually this one over here that's off by a 1/16 of an inch. So I'm probably just going to go ahead and leave it. I think that's going to be good enough. Alright, so I am looking at another obstacle here, and it's the can light in the ceiling. One of the things that I thought about is that can light has an arm on it, as you saw when I showed it earlier. And so I also ran into an issue with where the can light was going to fall on the ceiling, because I want to make sure it's nice and centered over the tub. And what I was going to do is run hat channel right along this joist here. And as you can see, the hat channel is going to be pretty close to that can light, so it was not going to work. That's the only place I can put hat channel and be able to span from here to this cavity over here at 24 inches on center and no more. So that is an issue. So what I ended up doing was putting some blocking around that can light, just like I had done with the wiring on the opposite end of the bathroom. So what I'm doing here is I thought about this and I said, you know what? I'm not so sure that blocking is not going to be an issue. And so what I did was I put a little bit of drywall on the ceiling just to kind of mock this up. And as you can see, the can light is actually resting on that blocking. One thing to remember though also is that the ceiling drywall is going to be a 1/2 inch lower than where it is right now because I have to put the hat channel in. So more than likely, as that can light passes through the ceiling, and when I go to install it, it's going to run into the blocking. And I'll kind of demonstrate that real quick here. So the can light's going to come up through the hole like this, and it's already hitting the blocking. And that's even with it being a 1/2 inch higher than when the drywall is going to sit when it's all installed later on. So what that means, I'm going to have to do one of two things. Either move the blocking back a little bit, which I can't really do because of the spacing between the hat channel on each end. I have to have screws going at 12 inches on center when I install the drywall by code, so that's not going to work. I'm about as far as I can go. The other option would be to possibly notch into this blocking here and maybe even bevel the front so that this can light passes over the blocking without impacting it. Alright, so this is mock-up take 2, and what I've done this time is actually put some spacers up there to kind of mimic where the hat channel is going to bring the ceiling down to. So I also have attached the drywall up there. I've got our hole up there. I've made a dado cut. You can kind of barely see it right there in that block. It's about a 1/2 inch cut. So we're going to try it one more time and see if we have some success here. So it does hit right there, but I'm actually able to clear it. And then when it's fully installed, it's about a 3/4 inch gap to an inch gap right up here at the top. So I think that's going to work out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for future videos. Visit our website at DIYapprentice.com.